the faith is not natural; it's supernatural.
Yeah.
So when you start going to the sacraments, it sticks. It changes your soul. It's not just like getting into being a vegan or something, or getting into, a new hobby. It's reforming your soul.
Here we go. Welcome to a special edition of the Focusing Way podcast. I'm your host, David Battistella. We call these special editions The Way is Love. Find The Focusing Way on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our website, thefocusingway.com. Today on The Way is Love on the Focusing Way podcast, author Kennedy Hall. We're going to talk about men and masculinity today. Anyone who has gone on a journey of self-understanding knows it takes a great deal of effort to look at yourself honestly. What you find is not always pretty. Transformation is often painful. You're a young father, and you're raising children. How much discipline does it take to raise a Catholic family in Western culture today?
Well, I'll tell you what, my children think VHS is a contemporary technology. So I say that because, we homeschool. Not everybody can homeschool. I understand that. We just do. There's no other option for us. And we just, and my wife wants to, and she does well anyway. But, it takes a lot of protective measures. So, my oldest is only 6. I got a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and we're expecting in a few months, 4 months or something. So my children are young. So they don't even, I think every once in a while, let them type their name on my Microsoft Word or something, but they don't know how to use computers. So we're not really worried about that. I don't have a smartphone. I use an old Nokia, like it's one of these candy bar phones or whatever. It's like, just use the old T9 texting. We don't have an iPad. My wife does have a smartphone. We do have whatever. We have protections on everything, passwords and things. All of the media that comes into our house, it's on the shelf. We have DVDs and VHS that we've approved. So even if they were to go downstairs, the only thing that I worry about sometimes is the odd preview from an old Disney flick, and it's for like some stupid movie, but that's as bad as it gets. So I sort of have my house set up where it's like they could open any book, they could make up in the middle of the night, and they could go put in any DVD that's on the shelf, and I know it'll be fine.
Right.
So that's the main thing. And then, when your kids are small, especially if you can put them in a good school or if you can homeschool them, when your kids are small, you're their whole world. So, our children are just starting to realize that not everybody goes to church.
Wow.
They're just starting to realize that like we were praying the rosary before we moved. It was last summer. We were on our front porch and we were praying the rosary as a family. And people walked by and they weren't praying the rosary. And my one, I think it was my daughter, she goes, "Isn't it rosary praying time? Why are they not at home praying the rosary?" Because they just this is what we do. Everyone must do it. So, they're getting formed in this environment. We have problems. We're not perfect. Don't get me wrong. But they're getting formed in this environment. So, by the time they start having more interactions with the outside world, outside the church community and things, they're just going to be so formed in this way that, again, anyone can make mistakes, and I'm not saying that it's perfect. However, this is sort of the atmosphere they're used to. This is the air that they breathe. This is what they're comfortable with. That's what I'd say about that.
Yeah. And you talk about evil images and, raising a young family right now, the challenges with trying to protect your children from their innocence, really, and it's literally one click away for so many children. And I remember hearing about imams in Eastern countries where they suddenly had this massive problem, young men and pornography, when the internet was opened up in their countries and they were just given this unlimited access, and they just witnessed in sort of real time this moral decay that happened because these men right before their eyes were falling to these images. So, how can you even begin to express how much of a problem that presents, not just to men, but then as a society as a whole?
Yeah, it's amazing to think about just how accessible immorality is for us today and how corrupting it is. Um, it is absolutely incredible the effect that that stuff can have on men, and anything's possible. Obviously, no matter how depraved in sin anyone is for any type of sin, grace is stronger than nature, and you can be healed, and you go to confession, and you can change your life, and that sort of thing. But it is an uphill battle if you're being inundated with this stuff, And I was exposed to it as a kid. It was common. It was just someone in the neighborhood, and it just happens. Okay. Um, it's very confusing, especially when the culture is trying to tell you that it's like it's healthy. It's don't be so old school. It's part of a healthy being testosterone or whatever. And it's it's absolutely paramount that we do everything we possibly can to protect our families and our homes from it, because I truly believe, like I know families, good Catholic families, and again, nobody's perfect, but they're good families and things go well. And, I'll have honest conversations with their 17, 18-year-old, 20-year-old kids. And, I'm 33, so we're close enough. They kind of think I'm young enough to chat with that way. And we'll talk about this stuff and they'll say, the stuff it disgusts me, because they were raised in a way where they were completely protected from it. And then as their conscience was forming, they were like, this is really wrong. So for them, it's like, this is an occasion of sin, and sin to them is repulsive because that's how they've been raised. So it is possible for us. It is possible for us to raise our kids, even going in this culture. Like, for example, I don't drive my car into telephone poles for fun because I know that that's dangerous to me. Okay. I don't watch pornography because I know that's dangerous to me. So it's getting that mentality, and we can do that. We just have to make sure that we establish that from the get-go.
Your own story comes through in the book, and you've got a tremendous amount of nostalgia for, I don't know, the things that kind of give you comfort. Like, when you're talking about your Nona Sugo and trying to get her recipe right or something. But you also, we all have a past, and you talk about yours a little bit. And tell me how you went from this, where you were sort of living in mortal sin, and the life that you live now, and the difference. Like, compare those two men, that man and this man that's before me.
Well, we all have temperaments and personality traits, and I've always, before I converted or reverted, my wife, so we had been together for a long time. Like, I've been with my wife since I was 19, so 14 years at this point. And but I would always get into something. I'm like, I'm into cycling now, I'm into this thing, or I'm going to be a lawyer or whatever. And I did the LSAT. I would always do something, and she'd say, oh, Kennedy's doing this thing. And whatever I would do it at 150%. It's funny. Everyone, when I was growing up, everyone thought that I was actually non-committal. Not that I wouldn't commit to things I had to, but they just thought I would always take on these crazy side projects. And it's like, that's just one of Kennedy's crazy side projects. But actually, later in life, because I've dabbled in 20 different things to an alarming degree of intensity, I have this repertoire of things that I'm able to do now to be more diverse in my professional life. So it has worked out. But in any case, when I discovered the faith, I went with it with reckless abandon, the same way I've gone to everything with reckless abandon. So my wife kind of thought, here he goes. He came back. I went to Mexico and had an experience at Guadalupe and came home, and I was this religious zealot. And she's like, oh, okay, you're this religious zealot, and I'll give it a few months. And but the thing is, the faith is not natural. It's supernatural.
Yeah.
So when you start going to the sacraments, it sticks. It changes your soul. It's not just like getting into being a vegan or something, or getting into, a new hobby. It's reforming your soul. And so that happened. And the deeper and deeper into it, it's just endless. So it's like I can continue with the same intensity every day because there's always something new.
I love what you're describing there, as the sacraments do reform you from the inside out. It's like cleaning out files on your computer or something.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like
Yeah.
it's just, you described it so beautifully right there. I just so resonated with that myself and my own experience of, and you're right, they do stick, and they're connected to us in some way that you can't undo that once you're in it.
Yep.
I really like what you said. I'm going to just quote, "It's a common lie told to young people today that they can be anything they want. Like most demonic deceptions, this is partly true," close quote. So what I want to ask you is, can you talk about half-truths and how they've been used against the truth?
Sure. Yeah. So for example, let's take another one. Everything in moderation. No murder in moderation.
Right.
No, just a little bit of heroin just on Tuesdays. Just go get stoned a couple times a week, not every day. Just be moderate. I mean, some people would probably say that, but that's in the Screw Tape Letters. That's one of the lies. That's one of the things the devil says. He says, make sure you make them believe everything in moderation, because that applies to religion too. Everything in moderation. Don't be an extremist. Just be moderately religious. Half truths are a big deal. I mean, it's even it's like what we've been going through today. It's like public safety. It's like, well, what do you mean by public safety? Or we're all in this together. It's like, well, what do you mean by that? All these phrases, these phraseologies. Chesterton would talk about sloganeering and phraseology, and how that was just it was the way that the modern man who was how did he put it? He would put it things like, well educated but poorly read, or something like that, or well read but poorly educated. And we fall for these things all the time, and they're easy. If someone says, listen, if you do this, you're doing it for your country. It's like, well, what am I doing? And what do you mean by my country? And should I be doing that? Or someone will say, in the spiritual life, well, you don't want to be rigid. Well, sure, I don't want to be rigid insofar as I'm unflexible to God's will. But holding fast to traditional piety is not rigidity. It's just tradition. And these are the little half-truths that always come out. They're everywhere. Yeah. They're absolutely everywhere. And if you want, you can use them to justify any way of life.
Yeah, and they're pervasive in terms of how the whole narrative comes at the average person. Here you are raising 4 children, expecting a 5th child. How do you, even before this whole world situation, how was that affecting how you were interacting with this society?
You do have to make a lot of hard decisions, and unfortunately, some people will think poorly of you. Even within family, because like, no, my kids can't come for a sleepover. They just can't, because I can't trust that they won't see certain things on the TV or whatever, or you won't hear certain language, and it's hard to tell people that, because then they immediately feel like they're being judged, and I'm not judging the person's soul. I'm just discriminating between good and bad actions, and that it is what it is.
But when I was growing up in an Italian household, this whole concept of come for a sleepover just was like, my parents were like, what are you talking about? My child has a bedroom and a bed and everything they need, and they can play in the yard together and throw a baseball back and forth until dinner time, and then that's fine, right? Like, and that was fine. And then in a sense, my parents were they overly cautious? Were they rigid? Were they I don't know. I can only be thankful. But as I go through the book, and it's like the kind of book you want to hand to every 20-year-old, that because there's been years, it seems, of seeing what's going on with young men today. And all of a sudden now there's a book where you can say, okay, well, maybe you should just read this over. You might find it like way too out there or way too difficult, but no one said that living this faith was going to be the easy road.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing ever. If you believe the Catholic faith, if you believe in the sacraments, then it only makes sense that the journey is going to be difficult. And the reason I say that is, why would God give us such extraordinary tools? It's because the journey is very extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you go to a sports store and you see certain equipment for mountaineering. Well, the reason why there's such an incredible amount of equipment that's so specialized is because it's very dangerous, you know, and you have to use it. It's the same thing with the sacraments. So the Catholic life is very difficult, but everyone's life is difficult in some way. Like, you know, my wife and I living under this weird political communism thing going on, and it's very hard to keep our heads and not give in, and it's very difficult, you know. And we were talking today. I said, you know, and I wasn't considering it, but I said, would it be easier? Like, would it be easier if we were just like, you know, so and so down the street who just believes everything on TV and just sort of lives that way? And we said, you know, it wouldn't be easier, because there would be another there'd be another sorrow. There'd be a different sorrow. There would be a helplessness. There would be a darkness, an ugliness, a blackness of a gray cloud of lies, and you can't escape that. You know, these people. I'm not judging, but I mean, you know, these people that are living as the world tells them to live, they're not happy. This is a thing that hurts everybody, and no one is without sorrow. At least when you're living the Catholic life, the sorrows are rightly ordered sorrows. You're weeping over Jerusalem. You're not participating in Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, you're at the cross weeping about injustice. You're not committing the injustice, hopefully, you know, and so everyone has sorrow, but at least with Catholicism, it's rightly ordered.
And you say it in the book, you know, if you live by the rules the world presents, you're living by stupid rules.
Yeah, you are.
You know, all you have to do is Google the questions Christ asked, and there's well over 100 questions. He's teaching by asking questions. He's sometimes even answering questions with a question in order to teach something, right? Like the whole concept of questioning is what was getting him into so much trouble, because he was disrupting a certain order or a certain one way of looking at things.
Well, that's that. Think about that. That's I'm a journalist for LifeSite News, and they don't allow us to go to. The Canadian government will not allow LifeSite News into press things. We used to be able to back when we were nobodies, but they just will not allow us anymore. Why? They don't like the questions we ask. That's it. They just don't want us to ask certain questions. You know, when I was, no one likes to have their. I don't want. It's not. I'm not in a position to tell anyone else they're sinful. That's not what I'm saying. But nobody wants to have their ego checked, or they don't want to have their contradictions called out. You know, when I was a teacher, and I was a religion teacher. Silly me, I thought I should just teach from the catechism and the Bible, and that would be religion. And I would be in these staff meetings with the religion department, and I remember there was a document coming forth, and it was about evolution in the Catholic faith. And there was a little room for wiggle room with certain things, but it presented this basically completely modernist, revisionist, to heck with the Bible thing, and it's all superstition, basically is what they were saying, with very flowery language. And I challenged it, and I wrote like a big reply, and it was a fly in everybody's ointment. I made everybody upset, and the diocese found out and we're not happy. It was a big thing. Like I was literally put on a blacklist because I couldn't speak to the diocese anymore because, you know, the parishes were behind, whatever. It was a whole thing. They hated the fact that I was just bringing up the things that they were supposed to know. And that's what Christ did. I'm not saying I'm Christ-like. I'm just saying he did that. And, you know, he would say things like, don't you know that this was not the way that it was since the beginning? And he would refer to Moses, and they'd be like, oh, this guy's using Moses against us again. We can't have this, you know, and they crucified him for it. And that's what happens in life. If you bring up the truth and you call people to understand, you're supposed to know this, and you're ignoring it, they don't like it, and they'll crucify you.
Kennedy Hall, the book is Terror of Demons, Reclaiming Traditional Catholic Masculinity. Thanks for being with me today.
Thank you.
Check us out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, our website, thefocusingway.com.